Since the beginning of human civilization, man has been using ships to go from one place to another, and it is obvious that during this entire journey, many accidents must have happened with these ships. RMS Titanic, SS Atlantic, Steamboat Swallow USS and RMS Leah have been recorded in the pages of history, but a horrifying sea story got lost somewhere in between these pages. This story was of SSR. This accident that happened in the middle of the 19th century is considered to be the most horrific accident in the history of the sea. Horrible because the reason behind the sinking of this ship was the passengers on board. As you reach the end of this video and become aware of the sinking of this huge ship, then you will see the most dreadful face of human nature. This story of SS Rick is very exciting but scary. Welcome. Before knowing the story of SS Arctic, it is important for you to know the history of this ship. In the 19th century, one of the largest ship manufacturing companies of America, Collins Line, built its third ship whose name was SS Arctic. Collins Line was famous for its magnificent ships and great crews. By 1857, this company had built 4 of its best ships, and SS Arctic was one of them. It was huge in size and nimble in movement, so it was also called the Clipper of the Sea. 284 feet long and 45 feet to 856 tons weighing, this ship was extremely huge. If we talk about its design, then it had a red-colored funnel, 2 masts and about 6 lifeboards, 4 of which were hanging on the deck and 2 were kept on its deck. Along with this, Arctic was also luxurious. It had a first class which was called saloon class and a second class as well. This ship launched in January 1857, and in October of the same year it also left for its first voyage. After this, for the next 4 years it made many such successful voyages without any problem, but then in the year 1854, things suddenly started changing. Arctic had an accident in which its engines were badly damaged, after which new engines were installed, and during this time Collins Line made a mistake which was going to prove to be very dangerous later on. While changing the engine, the outer layer of the hull of Arctic, i.e. its body, got damaged, which is very dangerous for such a ship which runs in water. Initially, no one noticed this mistake during repairing, but then the day comes. On September 20th, 1854, Arctic starts its journey from Liverpool to New York. When Arctic left Liverpool, there were 408 people with it, which included 233 passengers and 175 crew members. During this time, the captain in command of Arctic was James Luce. Captain Luce was a very experienced captain. During this time, apart from Luce, there were many other important people on Arctic. These included the family of Edward Collins, the owner of Collins Line, and the family of George Allen, one of the most influential people of that time, and James Brown. Captain Luce's 11-year-old son Willie was also with him on this journey. He had a rare disease, and Captain Luce was returning home after taking him to Europe in his last days. This journey, which started on September 20th, went on normally for the next several days. But as soon as the ship entered the central North Atlantic Ocean, when this happens, some such events began which were going to create problems for the Arctic in the future. The company Collins Line, which had built the Arctic, was constantly being pressurized by the politicians sitting in Washington to burn its ships at maximum speed. Therefore, the Arctic was also running at its maximum speed, and during this time, the date is 27th September. At this time, the Arctic was about 80 kilometers away from the coast of Newfoundland, and it was moving ahead in the sea at a speed of 13 knots, i.e. 24 kilometers per hour. At the same time, a ship of a French fishing company, SS Vesta, going from Newfoundland to France, was also moving ahead in the sea. This ship, filled with about 100 people, was taking the French fishermen working in Newfoundland to their home. Vesta was 152 feet long and weighed 250 tons. Arctic was almost halfway. On that day of September 27th, there was a thick fog in the Atlantic. Captain Luce did not want to go ahead at full speed in such fog, but he was helpless. Meanwhile, at 12:15 in the afternoon, the crew of Arctic saw a ship coming towards them at a distance of just a few kilometers. This was the same French ship SS that we had just mentioned. Arctic and West were so close to each other that they were about to collide. the officer present on Arctic had a few minutes to take any decision. Now in such a situation, there is a standard passing protocol for the ship, under which both the ships should be on the right side of each other to avoid any kind of collision. But here, if Arctic followed this protocol to the left, then it could easily get out of this danger. And for this, the captain of West also followed the protocol and went to the left side. If he went to the right side according to the protocol, then he would once again come in the way of Arctic. The officer present on Arctic did not know how the captain of West would react. So now the only option left for them was to follow their plan. The officer on the deck shouted starboat, which means turn the ship towards the port. These people are on the left side. The crew of Arctic did exactly what they were told, but perhaps the officers on the west panicked and took the help of standard protocol. They went towards the right, and now Arctic was on the left side. That means Vesta was now in the way of Arctic. They should not have done this. If the captain of West had reacted according to the crew of Arctic, then perhaps this accident would not have happened, but this did not happen. Captain Luce went to the deck and gave some orders, but now it was too late. West was in the way of Arctic, and within no time Arctic went ahead, crushing the front part of Vesta. At the time of collision, this demon ship was at its maximum speed, due to which Vesta turned terribly. In this collision, the wooden frame of the side of Arctic also got damaged, but West was almost completely destroyed. Due to the collision, the front part of West got covered with people present there. This part got completely stained with blood, and now it was almost certain that West would sink. The Arctic also got a strong jolt due to the collision, and it also became uncontrolled. But when the officers of the Arctic saw the damage to the railing, it was found that this damage was above the waterline. Therefore, it was not so dangerous. On the other hand, the captain of the West tried to handle the situation, but contrary to his orders, there was chaos on the ship. After the collision, there was a fog on the Arctic. The boat had moved ahead while leaving the ship. When Captain Luce looked back, he saw the West sinking in the water. The people on the West were screaming so loudly that their voices were reaching the Arctic. Captain Luce restarted the engines of the Arctic and ordered it to be turned towards the west so that the people on the west could be saved. He ordered Chief Officer Godley and Second Officer Ballum to get into the water with 2 lifeboards to help the west. Chief Officer Goley showed agility and immediately launched his boat into the water, and he went ahead towards the west. But it was taking time to launch Second Officer Ballum's boat. Then Captain Luce noticed that some strange sound was coming from the paddle box of the Arctic, which was getting deeper every moment. Captain Luce immediately ordered Second Officer Ballum to come back to the ship. Ballum returned to the ship. The west had hit the bow of the Arctic. Palm immediately went towards the bow, and what he saw here was extremely dangerous. Due to the accident, the front part of West which broke was stuck in the body of Arctic, and due to this the damage to Arctic was not above the waterline but below it. Slowly water started entering Arctic. And now, like West, Arctic was also sinking in the sea. Captain Luce immediately ordered to start the pumps and also tried to do something to repair the damaged part of Arctic. Arctic's pumps started, but its damage could not be repaired. Therefore, understanding the situation, Captain Luce decided to call back First Officer Goley as well, but unfortunately by this time Goley's lifeboat had gone ahead in the sea and disappeared somewhere due to fog. Chief Officer Goley was never seen again after that. At this time Arctic was about 4 hours away from the port of Newfoundland, and Captain Luce was still hopeful that they could reach there. Therefore, he immediately turned Arctic towards Newfoundland in the west. On the other hand, West was also sinking behind Arctic. Captain Luce could not help West even if he wanted to. Arctic was moving ahead at full speed, but gradually water got into its lower part, and this water reached the valves that made the gas. Due to which the gas stopped flowing, and now these two had almost stopped working. Captain Luce knew that almost all the chances of survival of Arctic were over. That is why he ordered the ship crew to prepare the lifeboats. Captain Luce wanted that all the lifeboats present on the ship should enter the water together so that they do not face any difficulty in reaching the land. But here things started getting out of Captain Luce's control. But the present crew stopped following Captain Luce's orders and rebelled against him. By this time everyone was worried about their lives, so the crew attacked the lifeboats. Many passengers lost their lives in this attack. A number of those who died were women and children. Captain Lewis somehow took charge and along with the passengers fought his own crew. By this time Second Officer Balaam was following Lewis' orders. But as soon as Balaam was ordered by Lewis to get into the water with a lifeboard, Balaam showed his true colors and ignoring all the orders of Captain Lewis, he ran away with the lifeboat along with some crew members, deceiving the passengers. By this time, 4 lifeboats present on the Arctic had gone and now 2 were missing. Only 1 lifeboard was left when a ship's engineer took control of a lifeboat and ran away with some of his companions, taking the food and pistols present on the ship. That is, now only 1 lifeboard was left on the ship. And the unfortunate thing was that not even a single passenger could be saved till now. Among these passengers present on the ship were the family of Arctic's owner Edward Collins and the families of people like George Allen and James Brown. Captain Lewis's son Willie was also with him. All the officers of Arctic, engineers and sailors, almost the entire crew had left Captain Lewis by this time. Now the sinking of Arctic started increasing rapidly. Lewis immediately along with some passengers tried to make a raft with the debris present on the ship with the help of the last lifeboard, which was to some extent like a lifeboard. Here, the poor families whose survival was difficult accepted their fate and calmly started praying to God for their salvation. In this group of destruction, there was also a third group of these passengers, which was perhaps the most disgusting face of human nature. These people started drinking and looting the liquor cupboard present on the ship. Many life jackets were looted and now these monsters wanted to do whatever they wanted. They tried to force themselves on the women and when people resisted, as a result, there was a lot of violence in the last moments of the Arctic and many people lost their lives. By this time almost the entire crew of Captain Lewis had betrayed him, but there were some among them who were loyal to their captain. 4th Officer Francis Dorian remained loyal to the captain till the end. Similarly, Engineer Stuart Holland, who sent a signal for help, also did not move from his place till the last moment and he was hoping that someone would see his signal. Stuart wanted to tell the world that there was someone who was at his post. A woman present in the Arctic, Anna Downer, also kept doing her work till the last moment. She was throwing out water with a hand pump and by this time her hands were soaked in blood. The ship was sinking fast so Captain Lewis asked her to return to her post, but instead of running away cowardly she decided to die bravely and stayed there. In some time the whole raft was ready, but in the meantime some bad people have a hold on this raft. And they hijack it and take the 4th Officer Francis Dorian hostage and also capture the last lifeboard. Now the final conclusion in front of Captain Lewis was that he had no chance of survival. So he accepted his death and decided to spend his remaining time with his sick son Willie and Collins Brown and Allen family. After struggling for about 4 hours, now the Arctic had surrendered in front of the sea, and with a strong jolt the Arctic sank into the water. Captain Lewis drowned in the water with his son in his arms, but in a short while he managed to come up. During this time his son slipped from his hands. During the collision with the West, the Arctic's paddle box was damaged, and when the Arctic sank in the water, this paddle box got separated from its debris and came back above the water, and the people who were swimming at the place where it came out of the water were all killed due to the collision. Captain Lewis's son Willie also could not be saved, and Captain Lewis also suffered a severe head injury. But he somehow regained consciousness and immediately went to that paddle box. This paddle box was floating in the water and working like a raft. About a dozen people took refuge on this raft. Brown Allen and the Collins family had drowned in the water and were finally present on this paddle box. Out of a dozen people, only 3 people survived. These 3 were Captain Lewis, Jolon, and a French sailor Franco Jassinet. This sailor fell into the water from West during the collision of West and Arctic and was then rescued by Arctic. At this time, 4th Officer Francis Dean's boat was also wandering here and there in the sea, when a ship named Canadian going towards Cuba sees their boat and takes with it about 30 survivors who were present on the boat. 4th Officer Dorian and the people who worked to save the survivors on the Arctic went straight to New York, and those who only thought of saving their lives went to Canada in fear and never returned. On the other hand, Captain Lewis John Allen, who survived last, and those sailors were so troubled that they were thinking of dying. But then 2 days later, on a ship Cambia going from Scotland to Canada, Captain Russell of Cambia rescued 9 people including Captain Lewis, who had fallen into the sea in the Arctic accident. During this time, 2 lifeboats of Arctic also reached St. John Port. The first lifeboat among them was of 2nd Officer Ballum, and the second lifeboat was of the deceitful engineer who had escaped after deceiving Captain Lewis. On reaching St. John, these people saw that in front of them was Vesta, where on one side, due to such a terrible collision, Arctic had sunk into the sea, and on the other side, Vesta, despite being badly damaged, somehow reached the shore. Vesta was so damaged that its captain and the entire crew felt that it was impossible for these people to survive, but they survived, and this miracle happened because of the crew of Vesta, who followed every order of their captain and faced those terrible circumstances like a team. They successfully reached St. John's. Till this time, the people present on the west felt that the Arctic had hit them and run away, and Captain Lewis was being considered the villain. But when the survivors of the Arctic came out, they told the world about this whole situation. If the crew of the Arctic was also like the West, then perhaps the Arctic would also have reached the shore safely. But this did not happen. For the next several days, no one knew what happened to the Arctic in the end, and almost everyone believed that Captain Lewis could not survive. But then on October 13th, the Cambia reached Canada, in which Captain Lewis was present. During this 14-day journey, Captain Lewis prepared a report and sent it to the Collins Line, in which he told Edward Collins, the owner of the Collins Line, about the entire accident, and informed about the death of his family. When the whole story came to the world, it was revealed that Captain Lewis was not a villain but a hero who was present on his ship till the last moment, and it was a matter of coincidence that his life was saved. After returning, Captain Lewis always regretted that he should not have sent First Officer Garley to help West, because he believed that Garley could have handled such a situation better than him and Arctic could have been saved. After this accident, Captain Lewis never returned to the sea, and John Allen and Edward Collins also never recovered from the shock of losing their families. About 88 people survived this great disaster in the Arctic. According to reports, at least 285 people and at most 372 people died in this accident. First Officer Garley was never seen again, and it was believed that Garley, who went to save West, could not survive himself. In short, there were 2 main culprits in this Arctic accident. First were those politicians who put pressure on the line to run Arctic at maximum speed. And the second were Second Officer Ballum and those cowardly and selfish crew members like that engineer who abandoned the ship and ran away. After the story of Arctic, it becomes difficult for a person to trust another person.